Wait, what? We're reviewing the French Dispatch. We're not reading the French Dispatch? Well, how is that my fault? The words sound so similar. What's going on, everyone? James here with another real review, and today I'm so excited to dive into Wes Anderson's latest film, The French Dispatch. A huge thank you to Searchlight Pictures for giving me the chance to watch this in person, because there was something kind of nice about watching it on the big screen. Even though the aspect ratio is generally in 4:3 and sometimes shifts to that 16:9 traditional widescreen aspect ratio, it was still cool to see it really just plastered up there with all the colors so bright and the sound so vibrant. So yeah, it is kind of special to see it in person if you are a Wes Anderson film, but if you're not, I'll tell you if it's still accessible to you. But before we get into the review and I tell you what I liked about the film and what I didn't, if it is your first time here at the channel, welcome to Real James, where we do talk about movies like this all the time, so you're not going to want to miss out. Go ahead and hit the big red button below, subscribe to the channel, tap on that bell, and hit the thumbs up button if you are a fan of Wes Anderson like I am, and get loud down below in the comments and let me know what you think of The French Dispatch, and tell me, what's your favorite Wes Anderson movie? So if you haven't already caught on, yes, the director is Wes Anderson here, and the movie is starring Adrien, Brody, Frances McDormand, Timothée Chalamet, and even Jeffrey Wright. And if you don't know much about what The French Dispatch is, because to be honest, before I sat down in my seat, I had just found out that this movie is structured a little bit differently. Let's dive into it. The French Dispatch itself is an American newspaper set in a French city with a team of reporters telling their stories, and us, the audience, seeing everything unravel in a collection of anthology stories. So yes, you guys, this does feel like you're going through a section of the newspaper, or a magazine in my case, but I do love the fact that what we get are different unique stories. So this won't be for everyone if you don't like anthologies, but if you do and you like Wes Anderson, I think there's a formula here that you'll love. And that is a perfect transition, honestly, to what I loved about The French Dispatch, because guys, Wes Anderson has a very specific formula and he's sticking to it here. And I don't mind it, honestly. I actually like how quirky this movie feels, how the score complements sometimes this warm feeling I got from the movie, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but also the anthology collection here actually serves the movie very well. I mean, when you look at the cast, it's a huge ensemble with a ton of amazing actors, and there's no way in a traditional movie that you'd be able to really give everyone at least proper screen time, but here with the way it's structured, you get exactly that. I mean, Benicio del Toro gets his time to shine, Léa Seydoux, you even have, like I said, Adrien Brody in that first major story that really blew me away. But I do love the fact that each vibe is different enough to where I could disconnect for a little bit and then get into something new. So it was so fresh, so unique, and honestly, no one's making movies like Wes Anderson is right now, and that is special in and of itself. And like I just mentioned, I do love how this movie really dives into the inner workings of a newspaper. Having written and been a reporter for a newspaper myself, guys, it is kind of special, and there are warm feelings I got from this movie. The whole process of mining for a story and being assigned to a beat is just such a cool feeling, and seeing these stories unfold as a non-linear story was pretty compelling. Each section was divided up. You had food and taste, or food and smells, or taste and smells, I can't remember, but the food section, the politics section with Timothée Chalamet, and then you had the art section, which was probably the most fleshed out in a way, with Adrien Brody, Benicio del Toro. So there was some special moments in this movie, but what's great is that the film at least allows everything to breathe. And on the technical side of things, before we get into the acting itself, you guys, Wes Anderson films, as you know, have really fun set designs, and the changes between each set were really amazing. During the food section with Jeffrey Wright, there's a moment where, horizontally speaking, you get so many different sets and he's just walking through each door, and every door he walks through is a new set. And I'm gonna be honest, guys, that's gotta be where most of the budget went for this film, because he at least went through 5 or 6 different sets within 30 seconds at the beginning of that section. So it is amazing, and there are moments where the film goes away from the more practical set and gets into literally cartoon animation style. The 2D hand-drawn animation that you usually see in like comic strips and whatnot was brought to life in that third act. So I almost wonder, and one of my friends actually said it, Is it maybe that the budget was cut, or maybe that they just wanted to be different? I'm gonna lean on the side that says Wes Anderson just wanted to be different, but he plays with different styles here, and I just loved it. Okay guys, so let's get into the cast, because for the most part, a lot of people are gonna be drawn into The French Dispatch because of some of these A-listers that are in this movie. But there were some clear standouts here for me, and it really does start with Jeffrey Wright. Now, forgive me, because I just don't remember the names of all the reporters, since I don't think the names were as important in this movie compared to what they were doing, because for me the movie, and maybe this is a little bit of a negative, doesn't do the greatest job at really addressing our characters often enough within these collections for me to really remember their names. But what they did was super memorable. Jeffrey Wright is at the top of that list though, because of the way he was able to narrate food, if that makes sense. I'd love to hear him talk about food for the rest of my life. The man is excellent. We know he's a great actor, but here I love that he took on a different approach, a different role, and his story about food slowly turned into a hostage situation. I can barely even say it, but it was just wonderful to see unfold, even though at the end it got a little tense. I do love exactly what they did with his story, and they allowed him the freedom just to act, and he did an amazing job here. And then there's Adrien Brody, who initially was, I thought, going to be the only standout because everyone else had their moments, but Adrien Brody blew me away early in the movie. He is always paired up against, or usually paired up against, Benicio del Toro, and both of them play off well, but Adrien Brody on his own is just excellent, man. It's kind of a wonder to me that he doesn't get more work these days, but it was just amazing to see him take on this role as an art collector, and just blew me away. And then there's the wonder boy lately, Timothée Chalamet, who, yes, if you watch my Dune review, you know that I loved. He blew away my expectations. But here, he plays this young activist in the politics section of The French Dispatch. And guys, I loved it. It's kind of crazy. I've turned around on Timothée Chalamet because I knew he was good in Lady Bird, but everything after that I didn't really care for. I didn't really like him in Call Me By Your Name. And man, in Dune and here in The French Dispatch, something about his range, his dynamic acting, he just is really good. And he was going blow for blow with Frances McDormand, where they have a certain affinity for one another in this movie that is interesting to say the least. But I do love how he was able to really go side by side with Frances, but also on his own, he just really took my attention essentially and focused it all on him, and I loved it. I thought that he did an amazing job. And then I have to say, there are some moments in this movie that I kind of forget these are A-listers because they disappear into the role. So Léa Seydoux, she just disappears into the role. Frances McDormand disappears. It's just really a cool thing to see in a movie that is actually as packed as this one. And also a huge shout out to Tilda Swinton, who does a really good job at narrating and walking us through the politics section. She made me laugh, and also she made me just kind of forget where I was and took me into the moment. So kudos, Tilda. So we got a beautiful film that plays with colors and set design. We have great direction here, a formula that works for me, and awesome acting. So what's left to talk about, you guys? Well, I'm gonna be honest. There are some things here in The French Dispatch that don't necessarily work for me. Now, I'm gonna start off by saying this. This film is not going to be accessible for everyone. If you don't already love Wes Anderson's formula, I'm sorry, I don't think you're going to love The French Dispatch. This is a hard sell for people who are not on board with his brand of filmmaking, because even though he's very unique, I don't think that this is going to work for everyone. It's not traditional. There's not a lot of linear connection here except for Bill Murray, who is the editor of The French Dispatch, and I don't necessarily think that this style, this pace is going to work if you're not familiar with a slow build up and then a boom, a hit at the end, because that's what Wes Anderson does usually for his movies, and it does happen here pretty often. It's just not going to work for everyone. And I'll be honest, as much as I do love the acting, I do think that there are some performances here that, one, are minimized, and two, just don't necessarily blend in well with everyone else. And that starts with Owen Wilson's segment. And it's funny because his opens up the movie after we get an introduction into the paper itself, but Owen Wilson's segment where he goes around Ennui and just kind of talks about the actual city and the people, I just never found it very interesting, and to be honest, that contributed to a really slow start for The French Dispatch to where I was actually getting a little worried. But luckily it is the smallest segment, and maybe that's on purpose, because to be honest, I never felt like Owen Wilson was committed to the role even though I like him as an actor. I just felt like maybe we could have cut that and the movie would have been either as great or even better. And then there are some performances here that do get buried, like Elizabeth Moss I thought would be featured a little bit more. She actually puts on a really fun performance sometimes, but then there are are others that maybe get highlighted that don't work all of the time for me either. And as much as I love Bill Murray, you guys, I do feel like his performance as the editor was a little weak compared to everybody else. And speaking of buried performances, I do really feel like Christoph Waltz could have gotten a little more play here too, but for the most part everyone gets a decent amount of screen time. It's just that there aren't as many standouts here as I thought there would be. But other than that, you guys, I really can't think of any other negatives for The French Dispatch because the pacing worked for me, the runtime never felt long, and honestly I was really compelled to the point where I thought at the end, kind of want a little more. So overall, you guys, The French Dispatch is a delight for fans of Wes Anderson. If you enjoy most of his work, you're gonna really enjoy this film and the stories that it has to tell. Now, is it one of the best Wes Anderson movies that I've seen? No, it is more mid-tier, but I will tell you that I had a very good time, and this felt like a warm blanket, honestly, and that's not because it's now 70 degrees in South Florida, but what I will tell you is that it touched a certain part of my heart, the part that was almost missing writing to make deadline, going and talking to a good editor and having them kind of like knock down some of your work to help build you back up better. And I loved that about this movie because it did feel like at the end, of course, they were all a family despite their different story beats. So yes, The French Dispatch really worked for me. It is going to be one of the more satisfying films of the year for so many, I think. I would recommend, actually, if you can safely, to go see it in the theater because it's nice to be kind of enclosed in that area, in that space, and just really focus in on that with no distractions, hopefully. So there you have it, you guys. That's my real review of The French Dispatch. So if I had to rate it on a 5-star scale, I give it a strong 4. Honestly, it does have a good blend of that Wes Anderson formula, some awesome acting, and enough compelling stories to really keep me engaged. But hey, I need to know what you have to say about the film, so go ahead and get loud down below when you see it this weekend. And if you haven't, let me know if you plan on seeing this film whenever it gets released. Can't wait to hear about your favorite Wes Anderson movies too. And if you haven't already, go ahead and hit the big red button below, subscribe to the channel, tap on that bell, and hit that thumbs up button, y'all, for more great reviews just like this. Y'all, it was a ton of fun talking about The French Dispatch, and even though I'd love to stay on camera, I kind of want to get back to the story I was reading. Alrighty, y'all. Again, thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you at the next screening. This is so interesting.